I'm currently closing a $42 million acquisition with a healthcare titan in New York, but my husband thinks I'm struggling to figure out how to use the new vacuum cleaner he bought on sale. My name is Caitlyn. I live in a 5-bedroom house in the suburbs of Minneapolis that I paid for in cash, while my husband, Brandon, complains that the Wi-Fi I pay for is too slow for his online poker games. He thinks I'm a broke, stay-at-home housewife. He has no idea that I am the shadow CEO of Silver Med, the very company that keeps his own employer from going bankrupt. But the silence I've kept for 10 years is about to become his worst nightmare. The morning sun in Minneapolis always feels a bit clinical, sharp, cold, and unforgiving. I stood in my kitchen, wearing a faded linen robe that Brandon bought me 3 Christmases ago, and to him I looked like a woman who had given up on her ambitions. But underneath that robe, I was wearing a Bluetooth earpiece, muted, listening to my chief financial officer, Eric, break down the quarterly projections for our East Coast expansion. Caitlyn, the board is concerned about the logistics partner in Chicago. Eric's voice crackled in my ear. They want to cut ties. Tell them to wait, I whispered, my eyes fixed on the door of the master bedroom. I'm looking into a local alternative. I'll send the memo by noon. I tapped the earpiece off just as Brandon walked in. He didn't look at me. He never does anymore. He headed straight for the coffee maker, the one I bought, though he thinks he earned it with a bonus he got 3 years ago. Is there any breakfast, or were you too busy staring at the wall again? Brandon asked, his voice laced with that casual cruelty he's perfected over the last 5 years. There's oatmeal in the pot, Brandon, I said quietly. He scoffed, dumping a mountain of sugar into his mug. Oatmeal, right. God, Caitlyn, sometimes I wonder what you actually do all day. You have no idea what it's like out there. The pressure, the corporate grind. I'm exhausted before I even pull out of the driveway and I come home to this. He gestured vaguely at our pristine kitchen, the one I spent 6 months designing with an architect while he was away on a business trip that I later found out was a golfing weekend with his buddies. I keep the house clean, Brandon. I handle the bills, I reminded him, keeping my voice level. It was a game we played. I played the role of the submissive wife, and he played the role of the overworked provider. The irony was, his salary, about $70,000 a year, barely covered the property taxes on this house. The other $145,000 salary I paid myself, plus the millions in dividends, stayed in accounts he didn't even know existed. The bills, he mimicked, a mocking twist to his lips. You mean you move the money I make from one account to another? It must be so taxing for you. He took a sip of his coffee and made a face. Too bitter. Fix it. As I took the mug from his hand, I remembered the man I met at 30. Brandon had been different then. Or maybe I was just blinded by the idea of being loved. He was attentive, noticing the smallest things. The way I liked my steak medium rare, the way I hummed when I was nervous. We married within a year. I wanted a partner, someone to build a life with. But as Silver Med grew from a 3-person startup in my garage to a multi-million-dollar distribution giant, Brandon stayed stagnant. He grew resentful of my hobbies, which were actually business meetings. To keep the peace, I started hiding my success. I told him I'd quit my job to be a housewife. I thought if I took the pressure of competition away, he'd find his own path. Instead, he just found his inner tyrant. By 10 a.m., Brandon was gone. The house transformed. I shed the linen robe, revealing a sharp, charcoal gray power suit. I sat at the mahogany desk in my hidden home office, a room Brandon thought was a walk-in storage closet for my crafting supplies. I spent the next 4 hours as the CEO of Silver Med. We were negotiating a contract with Vital Tech, the logistics firm where Brandon worked as a mid-level manager. He had no idea that the anonymous owner of Silver Med was the woman he'd yelled at for not ironing his shirts correctly the night before. Then, the doorbell rang. It was my mother, Frances. She's 72, with hands that still smell like lavender and flour. She's the only one who knows the truth. She was the one who lent me the first $5,000 to start the company. Caitlyn, darling, she said, pulling me into a hug. You look tired. Is he still being Him? He's fine, Mom, I lied, leading her into the kitchen. Just stressed at work. He's a fool, she sighed, setting a basket of fresh peaches on the counter. I don't know why you keep this charade up. You could buy and sell him 10 times over. It's not about the money, Mom. It's about, I don't know. Maybe I'm waiting for him to remember who he used to be. But fate doesn't wait for men to find their souls. That Saturday, everything changed. My mother had come over to help me garden. We were in the backyard laughing, covered in dirt, when Brandon came home early. He didn't even say hello. He stood on the patio, looking down at us with a look of pure disgust. Again? He barked. Is this a halfway house now? I come home wanting peace and I find more strangers cluttering up my space. My mother froze, a seedling still in her hand. Brandon, I was just leaving. Good, he snapped. Some people don't know how to respect boundaries. This isn't a social club, Francis. It's my home. I pay for the roof over your daughter's head, which means I decide who sits under it. The air left my lungs. It wasn't the insult to me. I was used to that. It was the way he looked at the woman who had treated him like a son. She's not a stranger, Brandon, I said, my voice dangerously low. She's my mother, and she's here because I invited her. And I'm uninviting her. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. Get it through your head, Caitlyn. You have no say here. You provide nothing. You contribute nothing. You're lucky I haven't replaced you with someone who actually knows how to run a household. My mother left in tears. I watched her car pull out of the driveway, and for the first time in 10 years, the love I had been trying to protect finally died. It didn't scream. It didn't cry. It just went cold. Don't ever speak to her like that again, I told him, standing in the middle of the kitchen. Brandon just laughed, a harsh, dead-jagged sound. Or what? You'll leave? With what money, Caitlyn? You'd be on the street in a week. Now clean yourself up. You look like a peasant. I'm going to the club. He left, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and cheap arrogance behind. I didn't cry. I walked to my hidden office. I pulled up the Vital Tech file. Eric, I said when he picked up the phone. That logistics contract for Vital Tech, the one we were going to renew next month. Yes, Caitlyn? Cancel the negotiations. Pull the plug on Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. And Eric, I want a full audit of their logistics department. Specifically, a manager named Brandon Scott. I want to know every cent he's spent, every business dinner he's billed, and every intern he's spoken to. Consider it done, Eric replied, his voice shifting into professional gear. Is something wrong? No, I said, looking at my reflection in the darkened computer screen. Something is finally right. I've been playing the role of the weak housewife for too long. It's time Brandon meets the woman who actually pays his bills. But I didn't know then that my body was about to betray me before I could finish my move. That night, as I sat at my desk, the world started to spin. The lines of code and financial spreadsheets blurred into a mess of gray and black. My chest felt tight, like a heavy stone was sitting on my heart. I reached for my phone, intending to call Eric, but my hand wouldn't obey. I felt myself sliding off the chair, the plush carpet rushing up to meet me. Everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the smell of bleach and the hum of machines told me exactly where I was. Mayo Clinic. My arm felt heavy, anchored by an IV drip. The doctor walked in, a man with tired eyes and a kind smile. Ms. Scott, you're awake. You gave us quite a scare. What happened? I croaked. Extreme exhaustion for one, but we ran some blood work and did a scan while you were out. Caitlyn, we found a mass on your pancreas. The word pancreas sounded like a death sentence. In the world of business, I knew how to handle a crisis. I knew how to pivot, how to hedge my bets. But you can't negotiate with a tumor. Is it? We caught it early, he said, touching my hand. But the treatment will be aggressive. You need to stay here. You need support. Support? I thought of Brandon. I reached for my phone on the bedside table and sent him a simple text. I'm in the hospital. Mayo Clinic. Emergency. Please come. I waited. 1 hour. 2. 5. The read receipt turned blue, but there was no reply. I sat in that sterile room, watching the sunset over the hospital parking lot, and realized I was truly alone. I had millions in the bank, a company that dominated the market, and a house that was the envy of the neighborhood, and yet I was a ghost. 2 days passed. No Brandon, no call, no text. I started my first round of treatment alone. The chemicals felt like fire in my veins. My hair didn't fall out yet, but I felt the life being drained out of me, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. On the 3rd day, the door finally opened. It wasn't a bouquet of flowers that Brandon brought. It wasn't a look of concern. He walked in with a leather briefcase and a look of mild inconvenience. "You look terrible," he said, not even sitting down. "I have a tumor." "Brandon," I whispered. "Yeah, I heard. Look, this is all very dramatic, but I've been thinking. This isn't working for me anymore. I can't be tied down to a sick woman. It's too much stress. I have a career to think about." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "I've filed for divorce," he said, tossing the documents onto my lap right over my IV line. "I've been generous. I'm taking the house and the Tesla. You can keep your little savings account. Since you're going to be in the hospital anyway, you won't need much. I think it's fair, considering I'm the one who's been carrying this family for years." I looked at the papers. Then I looked at him. "You're divorcing me? Now? In a hospital bed?" "Timing isn't great, I get it," he shrugged, checking his watch. "But Alyssa, my colleague, she thinks it's best if we start our lives fresh. She's younger, Caitlyn. She doesn't have your baggage." Alyssa, the intern, the one I'd seen him mentoring on his social media posts. "I see," I said, my voice remarkably calm. The pain in my body seemed to vanish, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a weapon. "You want the house, Brandon? The one you think you pay for?" "It's only right," he said. "I'm the man of the house. Now, just sign the preliminary agreement so we can move this along. I have a dinner date at 8. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. "Oh, I'll sign, Brandon," I said, a small, cold smile appearing on my lips. "But before I do, I want you to remember this moment. Remember the way you feel right now. Superior, untouchable, rich. Because in exactly 48 hours, your world is going to end, and I'm going to be the one watching it burn from this very bed." Brandon laughed, heading for the door. "You're delusional. It must be the meds. Get some rest, Caitlyn. You're going to need it." The door clicked shut. I picked up the bedside phone. "Eric," I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the blood in Brandon's veins. "Execute Phase 2. Cancel every contract we have with Vital Tech. File a restraining order for the Minneapolis property. And Eric? Call my lawyer. We're filing a countersuit for infidelity and emotional distress. I want him to leave that house with nothing but the clothes on his back." "Understood, boss," Eric said. "And the medical bills?" "Send them to Silver Med's corporate insurance. But Eric, make sure Brandon's name is flagged. I want him to find out who I am the hard way. When he tries to use his company card for that dinner tonight, make sure it's declined." I leaned back against the pillows, the IV dripping slowly. The war had begun, and Brandon Scott had no idea he had just declared war on the woman who owned the ground he walked on. The fastest way to reveal a man's true character isn't by giving him money, it's by taking it away. As I lay in my hospital room watching the poison of chemotherapy drip into my veins, I knew that miles away, at one of the most expensive steakhouses in Minneapolis, my husband was about to learn a lesson in basic economics. He thought he was celebrating his freedom with his young mistress. He didn't realize that every candle on that table, every drop of vintage wine, and the very chair he sat on was paid for by the useless woman he had just left to die. 8 o'clock, Manny's Steakhouse. I could see it in my mind as clearly as if I were there. The mahogany walls, the scent of aged beef and expensive cigars, the clinking of crystal. Brandon loved Manny's. It made him feel like the power player he desperately wanted to be. Across from him sat Alyssa, 24, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Brandon's weekly paycheck, another gift funded by my secret allowance. While they were looking at the dessert menu, I was looking at my laptop screen. Eric had given me remote access to the corporate card logs. "Everything is set, Caitlyn," Eric had texted me 10 minutes prior. "The moment he swipes, the system will flag it as stolen/unauthorized. The Humiliation is free of charge." I watched the digital cursor blink. There it was, an attempted transaction for $482.50. Status: declined. I leaned back against the hospital pillows, a sharp pain blooming in my abdomen, but I ignored it. I could almost hear the waiter's polite, strained voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, but the transaction didn't go through. Do you have another card?" I knew he didn't. His personal card was maxed out from buying Alyssa a designer handbag last month. His emergency card was a sub-account of mine. I took a sip of lukewarm water, the metallic taste of the chemo already coating my tongue. "Enjoy the walk home, Brandon," I whispered to the empty room. The next morning, Monday, the real storm hit. At 8 a.m., the CEO of Vital Tech, Arthur Peterson, arrived at his office to find an urgent, certified letter on his desk. It was the formal termination of the master supply agreement with Silver Med. No notice, no grace period, just a clean, surgical cut. Silver Med provided 60% of their medical inventory. Without us, Vital Tech was a hollow shell. By 9:30 a.m., Eric was standing in Peterson's office. I wasn't there physically, but Eric had me on a secure audio line tucked into his breast pocket. I wanted to hear the world crumble. "What do you mean, you're terminating?" Peterson's voice was high-pitched, frantic. "We've had a partnership for years. This will ruin us. Is it the pricing? We can renegotiate." "It's not the pricing, Arthur." Eric's voice was like ice. "It's the ethics. SilverMed has a strict zero-tolerance policy for professional misconduct. It has come to our CEO's attention that one of your managers has been, let's say, misusing company time and resources to facilitate a highly inappropriate personal affair." "Who?" Peterson demanded. "Tell me who, and they're gone. I'll fire them right now." "Brandon Scott," Eric said. The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Not only has he demonstrated a lack of integrity, but he has also been boasting that he controls SilverMed because of his personal relationship with the owner. Our CEO found that distasteful. "Brandon Scott?" Peterson sounded like he was choking. "That idiot? He told me he had the owner in his pocket. I promoted him because of that." "Well," Eric replied, "it seems he lied, and in doing so, he's cost you your biggest contract. Our CEO doesn't just want him fired, Arthur. She wants a formal internal investigation into his expense reports. We have reason to believe he's been billing his dates to the SilverMed account under the guise of client hospitality." I closed my eyes in the hospital bed, listening to the sound of Peterson screaming for his secretary to get Brandon into his office immediately. Justice is a dish best served with documented evidence. While Brandon was being escorted out of Vital Tech by security, I was facing a different kind of battle. The second round of chemo hit me like a freight train. The nausea was overwhelming. My skin felt like it was being scorched from the inside out. There were moments when the pain was so intense that I forgot why I was fighting. I forgot about the revenge, the company, the house. I just wanted it to stop. A nurse named Sarah stayed with me that night. She held my hair back as I retched into a plastic basin. She didn't know I was a millionaire CEO. To her, I was just a woman in room 402 whose husband hadn't shown up once. "You're so strong, Caitlyn," she whispered, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. "I have to be," I managed to say. "I have a lot of trash to take out." I thought about the house, and the one Brandon thought he was taking. That house was my sanctuary. I had bought it before we were married, but I'd foolishly put his name on the deed 5 years ago to boost his ego when he was feeling emasculated by his slow career growth. It was one of the few mistakes I'd ever made in business. But Minnesota law is specific. If I could prove the mortgage and upkeep were paid 100% from my non-marital assets and add in the weight of his proven infidelity, he wouldn't get a single brick. Tuesday morning, Eliza Harper, my attorney, walked into my room. She looked like she was carved out of granite. Perfect suit, perfect hair, and a mind like a legal trap. "He's served," Eliza said, sitting in the plastic chair. The process server caught him as he was leaving his new apartment, the one he's sharing with the intern. He tried to throw the papers back, but it's done. We've frozen the joint accounts, though there was only about $4,000 left in them anyway. And the house? I've filed an emergency motion for exclusive occupancy based on your medical condition and his abandonment. He has 48 hours to vacate. I also sent a notice to quit to the Vital Tech HR department regarding his misuse of funds. They're considering a civil suit against him to recover the losses. Good, I said, feeling a surge of energy that had nothing to do with the IV fluids. Let him feel the walls closing in. That afternoon, the phone in my room rang. It was an internal hospital line. "There's a Mr. Brandon Scott at the front desk," the receptionist said. "He's demanding to see you. He's quite agitated." "Tell him," I said, my voice steady, "that Ms. Scott is currently in a high-risk treatment phase and cannot see visitors who are not on the approved list. And then, call the police and report a trespasser. He is no longer my husband in the eyes of the law. He is a legal adversary." I hung up. I looked at the monitor next to my bed. My heart rate was steady. My oxygen levels were climbing. The doctor came in an hour later, looking at my charts with a puzzled expression. "I've never seen a patient react to this level of chemo with such vitality," he said. "Usually people are curled in a ball by day 4. "I have a very busy schedule, doctor," I smiled. "I don't have time to be tired." But the night is always the hardest. When the lights were dimmed and the hospital became a cavern of whispers and beeping machines, the ghost of the man I used to love haunted me. I remembered Brandon when we were 30. I remembered him holding my hand during a thunderstorm. I remembered the way he looked at me before the greed and the ego took him over. I cried then, not for the man he was now, but for the man I had lost a long time ago. I realized that my secret identity hadn't just been about protecting my company. It had been a test. I had wanted to know if he loved Caitlyn, the woman, or Caitlyn, the provider. He had failed the test so spectacularly that there was nothing left but the wreckage. Wednesday morning, Brandon finally figured out how to reach me. He sent an email to my personal address. No more "I love yous." No more "How are you feeling?" "Caitlyn, what did you do?" My card was declined at dinner. My boss fired me in front of the whole office. Security walked me out like a criminal. They said you canceled the contract? How do you even know the CEO of Silver Med? Who are you sleeping with to get that kind of power? I'm coming to the house to get my things. If you've changed the locks, I'm breaking the door down. You're a pathetic, sick woman trying to ruin a successful man. See you in court. I forwarded the email to Eliza and Eric. Phase 3, I instructed Eric. Phase 3 was the public disclosure. I authorized Silver Med's PR team to release a statement to the local business journals about our new logistics strategy, citing internal corruption at former partners as a reason for the shift. We didn't name Brandon, but in the small, tight-knit world of Minneapolis medical distribution, everyone knew. By Wednesday evening, Brandon's phone was blowing up with calls from creditors, former colleagues, and his friends at the country club. The rumor was out. Brandon Scott was the reason Vital Tech lost a $40 million account. He was radioactive. And Alyssa? Eric sent me a photo from a private investigator. It showed Alyssa packing her bags into a taxi outside the apartment Brandon had rented for them. She wasn't the type to stay with a man who couldn't pay for dinner, let alone a life. I lay in bed, the moonlight streaming through the hospital window, and felt a strange sense of peace. The tumor was still there, but it felt smaller, less powerful. The next morning, the door to my room opened slowly. It wasn't Brandon. It wasn't Eric. It was my mother. She looked older, her face lined with worry, but her eyes were fierce. She had found out I was in the hospital from Eric. "You didn't tell me," she whispered, or rushing to my side and taking my hand. "My brave, stupid girl, why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to handle it, Mom," I said, my voice finally breaking. "I wanted to finish the fight before I let you see me like this." "You don't have to fight alone anymore," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I heard what happened. I heard about Brandon. The whole neighborhood is talking. They say he was kicked out of the house by the sheriff this morning. I looked at her, surprised. The sheriff? He tried to barricade himself in. She smiled, a bit of that old Irish steel showing. He kept screaming that it was his house. The sheriff told him that since the homeowner, a Ms. Caitlyn Scott, had a restraining order and proof of sole ownership, he had 5 minutes to grab his clothes or go to jail. He left in a lift, Caitlyn, not carrying his shoes in a garbage bag. I started to laugh. It hurt my chest, but I couldn't stop. The image of the alpha Brandon Scott carrying his designer shoes in a trash bag was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It's not over yet, Mom, I said, squeezing her hand. The divorce is just the beginning. I want him to understand exactly what he threw away. I want him to know that every time he struggles to pay for a meal, every time he looks for a job and finds a closed door, it was because he chose to be a shadow when he could have stood in the light with me. He'll know, my mother said, kissing my forehead. But right now you need to heal. Silver Med can wait. The revenge can wait. You need to stay here for me. I will, Mom, I promise. But as I fell into a deep, medicated sleep, I knew that the biggest reveal was still to come. Brandon still didn't know that I was the CEO. He thought I was just a woman who had tricked the CEO into helping me. He didn't know that the witch he had emailed was the person who signed his paychecks for the last 10 years, and I couldn't wait to see his face when he finally walked into that courtroom and saw me sitting at the head of the table. They say the best revenge is living well, but in the corporate world I inhabit, I believe the best revenge is letting the person who tried to bury you watch you rise from the very grave they dug, and then sending them the bill for the shovel. 3 months ago, Brandon Scott left me in a hospital bed with a divorce decree and a smirk. Today, he's about to find out that the broke housewife he discarded doesn't just own the house he was kicked out of. She owns the very future he thought he was building with someone else. The air in Duluth, Minnesota is different from Minneapolis. It's cleaner, colder, and carries the scent of Lake Superior. A vast inland sea that doesn't care about human drama. I stood on the deck of my new glass and cedar home, watching the fog roll off the water. My hair was coming back. A soft, dark fuzz that felt like velvet under my fingertips. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor who had been through the fire and come out tempered like steel. 2 weeks ago, my oncologist at Mayo Clinic had given me the words I'd fought for. Caitlyn, the scans are clear. You're in full remission. I didn't cry then. I just nodded, thanked him, and called Eliza Harper. It's time, I told her. Set the final deposition for Friday. And Eliza, tell them I'll be attending in person. No Zoom calls. I want to see the color drain from his face in high definition. Friday morning arrived with a crisp, autumn chill. I chose my outfit with surgical precision, a tailored, cream-colored power suit by Armani, heels that made me stand 6 feet tall, and the Patek Philippe watch I'd bought myself when Silver Med hit its first $10 million in revenue. I looked like money. I looked like power. When I walked into the conference room at the law firm, the atmosphere shifted. Brandon was already there, sitting next to a cut-rate lawyer who looked like he'd bought his suit at a liquidation sale. Brandon looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, his skin sallow from too many night shifts and not enough nutrition. He was wearing the same suit he'd worn to our wedding anniversary 3 years ago, but it hung off his frame. When he saw me, his jaw literally dropped. He expected to see a woman withered by chemo, someone he could bully into a settlement. Instead, he saw the CEO of Silver Med. Caitlyn, he stammered, standing up, You look better than you expected? I sat down at the head of the table, not across from him, but at the head, the position of authority. Eric sat to my right, a thick leather folder in front of him. Let's get started, Eliza said, her voice cutting through the tension like a diamond. We are here to finalize the division of assets. Mr. Scott, you've requested 50% of the marital home, 50% of the investment accounts, and spousal support due to your unjust termination from Vital Tech. Brandon found his voice, though it was shaky. That's right. I supported her for a decade. I'm the reason she had a roof over her head. It's only fair that I get my share now that I'm struggling." I didn't say a word. I just looked at Eric. Eric opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "Mr. Scott, this is the original deed to the property. As you can see, it was purchased by Caitlyn Woods, Ms. Scott's maiden name, 2 years before your marriage using funds from a private trust. The joint status you claim was a gift of equity that was never legally finalized due to a lack of consideration. You never paid a cent toward the mortgage. In fact, we have the records showing the mortgage was paid monthly from an account belonging to Silver Med Distribution." Brandon frowned. "Silver Med? Why would her hobby company pay for our house? And besides, I'm the one who secured their contracts. I practically ran that partnership." I leaned forward, the light catching the diamonds in my watch. "Brandon, you didn't run the partnership. You were the puppet we used to keep the optics consistent." "What are you talking about?" "I am the 100% owner of Silver Med, Brandon," I said, my voice low and steady. "I founded it. I built it, and I am the one who personally signed every one of your performance bonuses that you used to buy gaming consoles and sneakers. You weren't a power player. You were an expense on my balance sheet." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched as the realization hit him. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, it was a slow, agonizing crawl of horror. He looked at his lawyer, then back at me, then at the Silver Med logo on the documents. You're the CEO?" he whispered. "All those nights you said you were volunteering or crafting." "I was running a multi-million-dollar empire," I replied. "I hid it because I wanted to believe you loved me, but you didn't. You loved the comfort I provided while you looked down your nose at me. You treated me like a servant in a house I bought. You disrespected my mother in a kitchen I designed. And then you tried to leave me to die when I became inconvenient." Eliza slid another set of papers forward. "And then there's the matter of Alyssa Morgan. We have the geotagged photos from the hotel in Chicago. We have the credit card statements, Silver Med corporate cards I might add, that you used to pay for her flights. In the state of Minnesota, this constitutes a gross breach of marital duty and dissipation of marital assets. Not only are you not getting the house, Brandon, but we are suing you for the return of every dollar you stole from the company to fund your affair." Brandon's lawyer leaned over, whispered something in his ear, and turned pale. "This is a joke," Brandon croaked, though his eyes were brimming with tears of panic. "Caitlyn, please. I'm broke. I'm living in a studio apartment in Brooklyn Park. I'm working the night shift at a warehouse. I don't have anything left." "You have exactly what you earned, Brandon," I said, standing up. "You wanted a life without me. You wanted a younger woman and a fresh start. Well, you have it. You just don't have my money to pay for it." As I walked toward the door, Brandon lunged forward, grabbing at my sleeve. "Caitlyn, wait! I'm sorry, I was stupid. I'll do anything. We can try again. I'll take care of you now. I promise." I looked down at his hand on my expensive suit. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hatred. I felt a profound sense of pity for a man so small that he could only see my value when it was attached to a bank statement. "Take your hand off me, Brandon," I said quietly. "And don't worry about taking care of me. I've been taking care of myself and you for a long time. I think I'll stick to doing it on my own." I walked out of that room and never looked back. The aftermath was exactly what he deserved. Brandon couldn't fight the evidence. He signed over all claims to the house and agreed to a repayment plan for the misused funds just to avoid jail time for corporate fraud. Last I heard, he's still working that night shift. His sneaker collection sold on eBay to pay for a lawyer he can no longer afford. Alyssa? She disappeared the moment the money dried up. Her father, the Chicago director, was so embarrassed by the scandal that he sent her back to the family farm in Iowa. She's no longer an intern, she's a cautionary tale. As for me, I returned to my house by the lake. One evening, Eric came over. He didn't bring business papers this time. He brought a bottle of wine and 2 steaks for the grill. We sat on the deck, the fire pit crackling between us. "You look peaceful, boss," Eric said, looking out at the water. "I am, Eric. For the first time in my life, I don't have to hide who I am. Not from the world, and certainly not from myself." I took a sip of the wine, the good stuff, the kind I used to hide in the back of the pantry so Brandon wouldn't waste it. It tasted like victory. My journey wasn't just about surviving cancer or getting revenge on a cheating husband. It was about reclaiming the throne I'd built but was too afraid to sit on. I had spent a decade dimming my light so a small man wouldn't feel overshadowed. Never again. If you're watching this and you're feeling small or unheard or like you're sacrificing your soul for someone who doesn't see your worth, remember my story. You are the CEO of your own life. You hold the pen that writes your final chapter. Don't let someone else tell you what you're worth, because the moment you realize your own power, the world has no choice but to follow your lead. My name is Caitlyn. I am a survivor. I am a CEO. And I am finally, truly free. What do you think of Caitlyn's journey? Would you have stayed hidden for that long? Or would you have unmasked the truth sooner? Let me know in the comments below. If you found strength in this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice. Until next time, stay strong.